Hello, I'm Africa 54 Managing Editor Vincent McCory in for WEWE. It's Monday, May the 3rd. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Amid a surge of COVID-19 cases in India and other parts of the world, the Biden administration remains non-committal on a proposal to loosen patent restrictions so that countries can manufacture generic versions of the coronavirus vaccines. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this report.
Desperate Indians wait in line for vaccinations as the country's coronavirus crisis deepens, with the daily death toll climbing above 3,600.
We are searching oxygen all over India, all over Delhi, to Chandigarh, Ludhiana, Haridwar, Jaipur, and all over nearby cities.
In October 2020, at the World Trade Organization, India and South Africa proposed the so-called TRIPS waiver, which would allow countries to make generic versions of the vaccine. The proposal continues to languish without backing from the European Union and the United States. 100 million Americans have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. But speaking on board Air Force One on Friday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said President Joe Biden still has not decided on vaccine patent waivers.
Our overall objective is to provide as much supply to the global community and do that in a cost-effective manner.
Waiver proponents, including the progressive wing of Biden's Democratic Party and humanitarian organizations, say that it could be a game changer in the global fight against the pandemic.
I think TRIPS waiver is one of the critical tools that can empower government to address the current situation of scarcity of supply.
But the administration is also under pressure from pharmaceutical companies who say that rather than waiving patents, the quickest way to help countries in need is by accelerating existing production lines and donating doses. An intellectual property waiver would not help accelerate COVID-19 vaccine access or address the very real supply chain and logistical constraints, an industry spokesperson told VOA. Even Bill Gates, the billionaire philanthropist and driving force behind COVAX, the UN mechanism to improve low and middle income countries' access to vaccines, is against waiving patents.
It makes very little sense. And this is a mistake on his part. And sometimes we should listen to billionaires when it comes to things on global health, but sometimes we really shouldn't. And this is one where we don't want to listen.
To reduce global vaccine inequity, Gates is instead pushing for technology transfer, where the private sector invests in new manufacturing capacity and shares know-how with emerging economies. He spoke at the Munich Security Conference in February.
Part of the way to solve that inequity is to get factories in India up in full speed. That's already happening with AstraZeneca. It'll happen with two of the others. And to get the financing.
The proposal to waive vaccine patent is supported by more than 80 WTO members, 60 former heads of states, and 100 Nobel Prize winners. It will again be in focus at the WTO General Council meeting on May 5th. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Monday is World Press Freedom Day. The coronavirus pandemic has killed more than 3.1 million people and infected nearly 150 million worldwide. That's according to Johns Hopkins University. Living through and documenting the pandemic brought a multitude of challenges, especially for women reporters, according to the Coalition for Women in Journalism. VOA correspondent Mariama Diallo has this report.
The lockdown that began in March 2020 were key strategies used around the world to slow the spread of the coronavirus pandemic.
As you know, journalists have to be on the front line and they have to be out there to be able to report. I think in the early March, we saw this complete sort of huge challenge where women journalists, especially freelancers, were facing this challenge of finding a job to be able to do.
As the pandemic took a toll on lives, governments took drastic measures, including closing borders and imposing quarantines to protect medical systems from being strained. But some of them also tried to control the storyline, she says.
We saw this in Turkey, Lebanon, Egypt, some of these countries, China, Pakistan, some of these countries use the opportunity of COVID-19 into politicizing the issue and creating misinformation about journalists who had been trying to do their job.
How so? She explains.
This has happened in Pakistan. I'll give you an example of one of our members, Asma Shirazi. Whenever she is reporting on the spread of the virus, government inefficiencies, or whatever the government should be doing and they aren't doing, she's targeted with misinformation campaigns. We have several other similar incidents where women journalists have been impeded after reporting on COVID-19 in particular.
In Turkey, journalist Ebru Kucukaydin was taken into custody after one of her coronavirus reports and later released. The Turkish government accused her of creating panic. Other journalists, Malaysia's award-winning Wan Noor Hayati and The Guardian's Cairo correspondent Ruth Michelson, faced charges or were expelled or harassed for their coverage of the pandemic, the coalition says. Last year, the International Federation of Journalists surveyed nearly 560 female reporters from 52 countries and found that stress increased for 77% since the pandemic began. Catherine Gicheru leads the Africa Women Journalism Project in Kenya, an initiative started by the International Center for Journalists. She's seen the negative effects the pandemic has had on some women journalists in countries where gender discrimination is widespread.
I have reports also from the fellows in Tanzania and in Uganda as well as in Nigeria, is the fact that if you have to work from home, then you're the one who's also taking care of the family. And that's 2, 3, 4 times the job that a woman journalist was previously doing. And that is across the board. So you have the mental anxiety, the stresses, the fears that everybody has, but much more for women, especially women journalists.
She also says women journalists have been hit with job losses.
It's a problem all over the world, but a lot of journalists have lost their jobs. The women, a lot of them, especially in Kenya, are either on contract terms or are freelancers. And the fact that they've lost they've either been laid off or they've been put on half pay, it means the situation has become even more difficult.
And she says it has had an impact on coverage of other women-related topics, including sexual health, obstetric fistula, and female genital mutilation. Mariama Diallo, WEWE News, Washington.
Investigative reporters often generate shock waves worldwide for their reporting as media houses and independent journalists invest more money into in-depth reporting. WEWE's Paul Dihon recently sat down with Anas Aremio Anas, a Ghanaian investigative journalist in an undisclosed location whose works have exposed various individuals and organizations engaged in crime, corruption, and human rights abuse. He talks about the challenges he faces.
My name is Anas Aremio Anas. I'm an undercover journalist from Ghana.
What are some of the obstacles you've encountered in doing your job, especially here in Ghana and maybe across Africa? Because you've gone to the length of doing a lot of undercover stuff in Africa.
Key problems that journalists across the continent face will be, first and foremost, the enabling environment to be able to be productive as a journalist. We have political pressures, business pressures. Of course, you can't also forget the fact that journalists are poorly paid. And all this culminates in the fact that the journalist becomes an endangered species, so that we get attacked, we get killed every day.
Is investigative journalism effective, especially in the light of like what's happening on the continent?
Clearly, yes, it is effective. When we look at the story I just broke on the football scandal,
that was good,
which affected the World Cup. When you look at the number of referees that the story affected, and also the death angles where people go in stadiums and they end up attacking referees and there's a stampede and people die and all that. It tells you that investigative journalism really which shines light on issues that affect us. You take a look at the judges scandal, where people who were supposed to be gods in the guise of men who were supposed to adjudicate over taking bribes and all that. It tells you that indeed if if we don't push the frontiers of investigative journalism on the continent, then we aren't doing anything at all.
In the eyes of God, the documentary that you did, what was it like to film it? And were you threatened by doing that kind of job?
This is not unique to me as a journalist. There are many African journalists who have died. Talk of Norbert Zongo, Dele Jiwa, and all of them. So
and
I'm
one
not
of your
the
colleagues?
first. Yes, and Ahmed Swali. I'm not the first to complain of threats. So indeed, all these stories come with various levels of threats. And for me, in the years of work, you get threatened, and that tells you the effect of the work you're doing. If you do a story and you don't get this threat coming, it means perhaps you are not hitting on the right nerve. So it is a daily phenomenon. It occurs not only to me, but many other African journalists. Back to the judges scandal. Of course, you were talking about the lives of very senior people in the judicial hierarchy. We were talking about 34 judges, and we talk about over 140 judicial staff. It was a total overhaul of the judicial system. So indeed, the level of threat was there. But threats only don't come in physical attack. For example, I had over 64 legal suits on the judges scandal. In the football scandal, I've had over 50 court suits. But once you stick by the rules of the game, clearly there is nothing that is going to push you back. Despite the physical threats, despite the legal threats and all that. If you stick by the truth, it will be difficult for people to bring you down.
Do you think investigative journalism is overlooked? For example, a person like you go the extra mile to bring us these stories. When you look at, like, let's say, for example, the Western world, investigative reporting really is the key. But here, do you think we have that kind of environment where reporters like you are doing what they should be doing? Do you have the support system?
See, I've always argued that journalism is about our people. Journalism is about our community. Nobody can tell the story of our villages better than us African journalists.
I agree.
We are the ones who can tell the stories. And the three main principles that my journalism hangs on is naming, shaming, and jailing. I collect hardcore evidence, go and stand in the court of law and testify and make sure that the bad guys go to jail. Chinese sex mafia, they are in jail for 45 years. Nana Kwesi Agyemang, a man who raped girls as young as 3, is in jail for 10 years. The cocoa smuggling story, they are in jail for 15 years.
How would you respond to people who say that every day you put your life in danger?
Non-response as a journalist leads to deaths. That's what it is. That's the reality. It would always be the hazards of the profession. Journalism would always remain a hot kitchen. If you don't have the energy, you get out.
What keeps you going?
When that old woman, I see that big smile on the face of that old woman who tells me that because of that story, those children's lives have been saved. Who tells me because of that good story you did, I now have good drinking water. Who tells me that because of the story you did, I have access to good health. Because of the stories you did, the politician who stole our money is in jail. That gives me a big smile. My stories impact real lives, and it has had significant impact on the populace. And it has contributed to strengthening the democracy we have here in Ghana and Africa as a whole. And that gives me some joy.
Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, a pleasure meeting you, and thank you so much for honoring our request.
Thank you.
That was WEWE's Pondiho speaking with investigative journalist Anas Aremio Anas. Now to two deadly attacks over the weekend. First in Central Africa, where militants killed at least 19 people, including 10 soldiers, in raids on two villages in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo on Saturday. This only hours after President Felix Tshisekedi had declared a state of siege in North Kivu and Ituri provinces on Friday. He did not say what steps would be taken next under the state of siege. A surge in attacks by armed militants and intercommunal violence in the east have killed more than 300 people since the start of the year. In West Africa, gunmen killed 16 soldiers and wounded 6 others in an ambush in southwest Niger over the weekend, according to 2 security sources. The attack on an army patrol occurred on Saturday afternoon in the Tuarua region. The area is close to where raids killed 137 civilians in March. It is unclear who carried out the attack, but the area is overrun by jihadist groups with links to Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. Senegal has a long tradition of interfaith respect and tolerance. In honor of that, young Christians made a goodwill gesture by distributing snacks to Muslims breaking their fast one evening during the holy month of Ramadan. Alison Lekogo Fernandez reports from Dakar. Carol Gunsberg narrates.
An hour before sunset, dozens of young people have gathered in a Dakar school. Mostly Christians, they're hurriedly bagging breads, dates, other snacks, and drinks to hand out to needy Muslims ready to break their daily Ramadan fasts. It's an iftar on the go. Marie Cardinal, a nurse and one of the iftar organizers, says the effort grew out of a joking exchange on a Facebook page called Going Out in Senegal. The page has roughly 13,000 followers of all faiths. One February day during Lent, the 40-day period of sacrifice leading up to the Christian celebration of Easter, someone posted a sight gag about meatless Fridays.
The Muslims went to Saras, a slaughterhouse, to eat good meat. They took pictures and posted these to the group. It was just to spoof us, so we thought we would do a comeback.
So, in the midst of Ramadan, Cardinal and others posted photos of delicious foods to tease their Muslim friends who fast during the day. Everyone had a few laughs. Then Cardinal's group got serious and decided to gather food to give out. In less than 72 hours, they had collected breads, dates, and other foods, enough to prepare more than 2,500 bags. Ousmane Koli, a Muslim, wanted to join in the iftar effort.
I saw that it is social work. I came to contribute to the distribution. I am very happy seeing that we are helping people in need. It gives me joy.
Suleiman Diallo, an apprentice bus driver, appreciates the gesture.
People need this. It is a very good initiative. In Senegal, Christians and Muslims have always lived in perfect harmony. Each respect the faith and beliefs of the other. It's not new.
Senegal's nearly 7 million people are overwhelmingly Muslim, 95%, and Christians account for 5%, or 1 in 19 people. The West African country has a long history of peaceful interfaith relations. For Alison Lekogo Fernandez in Dakar, Carol Gunsberg, VOA Africa.
Every evening during Ramadan, the Muslim month of fasting, people break the fast in a celebration with family and friends in a meal known as iftar. During the COVID-19 pandemic, some have come together in communal celebrations through social media. And as Michael Sullivan reports, one organization in Los Angeles is using a virtual iftar to bridge the gap between Muslims and Jews.
Each day of Ramadan, iftar is a time for relaxation at sunset after a day of fasting. Allahu Akbar, Allah. This Ramadan, some in Los Angeles, California, are hosting a virtual iftar with an unusual interfaith flavor, says one Muslim participant.
We did the call to prayer from 3 different synagogues throughout the Los Angeles area, which was extremely, first of all, I thought it was very beautiful and very powerful. But secondly, it expressed for all of us the unity and fact that we are all one community.
The virtual iftar was sponsored by New Ground, a Muslim-Jewish partnership for change, and was held online this year with a welcome from Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. It included a virtual visit to the kitchen of an imam and his wife to watch them prepare their favorite iftar dishes, and a visit to the kitchen of a rabbi and her husband to see their favorite foods prepared. But participants say iftar and Ramadan are not just about food and fasting.
And I think some of the messaging from it is, sacrifice, patience, empathy.
And strengthening bonds with others, including those of different faiths, says a Jewish participant.
We start with relationships. We start with telling our personal stories, dealing with our own identity.
And acknowledging differences, he says, while the sharing of personal moments helps to bridge the gap over divisive issues, like the difficult relations between Palestinians and Israelis that often separate Jews and Muslims.
But it also gave me a whole different vocabulary and a skill set for how to express myself and how to have difficult conversations.
The ongoing interactions through events like these, either virtual or in person, teach participants how to listen.
A long time ago. We may agree to disagree a lot of times, but that's part of the process of understanding each other and actually being able to empathize with another person and their views.
Skills, they say, that are useful for people, whatever their background or religion. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
President Joe Biden became the first U.S. president to officially recognize the massacre of Armenians under the Ottoman Empire as a genocide. Shake Avuyan has the story, narrated by Anne Rice.
Armenians demand justice!
President Joe Biden became the first U.S. president to declare the mass slaughter of Armenians at the hands of Ottoman Turks more than a century ago a genocide. The declaration threatens to further erode relations between Turkey and the U.S. Turkey has long denied a genocide or any deliberate plan to wipe out Armenians. But Biden's declaration was welcome news to Armenians, who have been working for over a century to call attention to the events of 1915. In 1915, following the request of then U.S. Ambassador to Ottoman Empire, Henry Morgenthau, a group of Americans founded a Committee on Armenian Atrocities, which raised funds to help millions of Armenian, Greek, and Assyrian people in the Near East. The Armenian Genocide Museum and Institute in the capital city of Yerevan documents that initiative and how it led the United States to provide help to survivors. The humanitarian movement united the entire society, everybody from ordinary citizens to people in power, all the way to the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson. A humanitarian fundraiser launched in the U.S. in the years following the events of 1915 uses now common techniques such as small donation boxes with images of a person. In this case, an image of Shushan, an Armenian orphan whose story is told right on the box. There are even donation boxes for children. This image depicts the Armenian orphan city, the largest orphanage in human history, with over 25,000 orphans sheltered in the orphanage. The various documents tell the story of American volunteers and missionaries who saved and took care of Armenian orphans, giving them a second chance. These are American orphanages and hospitals established all over the Ottoman Empire. The shelters that were also called sanctuaries, as well as the tent cities. These volunteers left their homes and risked their lives to help the survivors of genocide, Hanuman noted, a sacrifice that saved tens of thousands of Armenian orphans. For Shake Avayan in Yerevan, Armenia, Anna Rice, VOA News.
After 20 years, the final U.S. drawdown of troops from Afghanistan has begun, marking a watershed moment for both countries. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has the story.
Pentagon officials say the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan is now underway, with some equipment being packed up and shipped out. U.S. President Joe Biden has acknowledged serious security concerns, but says U.S. troops cannot remain in Afghanistan indefinitely.
We degraded the terrorist threat of al-Qaeda in Afghanistan
And after 20 years of valor, and sacrifice, it's time to bring those troops home.
The State Department has sought to reassure Afghans that the United States remains committed to the country.
The only military presence that will remain in Afghanistan is the very limited presence required to protect our embassy. And that's important for the reason I was just discussing. Even as we disengage militarily from 20 years of military involvement in Afghanistan, our presence on the ground will remain through our embassy, through our civilian representatives, including our diplomats.
The drawdown reminds some analysts of the last U.S. troops leaving Vietnam in 1973, a watershed moment for both countries.
I think there must be many Afghans, particularly Afghans in urban Kabul, particularly women professionals in Kabul, who do to a degree believe that the United States has made certain commitments and now it's cutting and running. It's a very difficult moment for U.S. foreign policy, as was our departure from Vietnam.
Other experts point out that when it comes to assigning responsibility for failing to help Afghanistan become a secure, flourishing democracy, there is plenty of blame to go around.
This is a long and significant investment that has not paid off, but others in the region have also not brought about peace in Afghanistan. To the contrary, they have continued to play a variety of other games. Afghans' own political leaders have not come together in unity or found a means to negotiate peacefully with one another in ways that would bring about a stable country.
Many Afghan women say they dread a possible return to power of the Taliban once foreign troops are gone, and say they will fight to hold on to their hard-won rights. When the Taliban ruled Afghanistan in the late 1990s, women were barred from participation in public society, including going to school and work outside the home, and some women were executed for alleged adultery. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Ili kuwa mwanafamilia bora wa Global TV, usisahau kusubscribe, like, kushare na kucomment. Baada ya kusubscribe, bonyeza alama ya kengele ili kupata taarifa kwa kila video inayopanda Global TV Online.